Union Arena Fullmetal Alchemist preview. So we'll be doing a spoiler-filled preview of the new Fullmetal Alchemist cards coming soon. So just because we're going over spoiler cards, these will be translated Japanese cards, so just keep in mind. And that's why we'll be going over some translations. So outside area is sideline, remove area is removal area, main is activate main, on played is when played, and on retire means when sidelined. So the starter deck releases pretty soon, in about a few weeks, so it releases on July 18th, 2025. And in the starter deck, these are the cards that you can only get. So this is the SR, the Edward Alphonse, which is an Impact 1 raid card that says, on play, you may look at the top 6 cards of your deck, reveal up to 1 character card or field card among them and add it to your hand. Place the remaining at the bottom of your deck in any order. If you did, place one of this character's raid source to the outside area. This character is no longer in raided state. So basically it allows you to search for pretty much any card in your deck that is not an event card, but you do lose the card underneath, so this card will lose impact in doing so. But I would assume that there are cards that allow it to be re-put into raid state, so keep that in mind. The next card we have is a 3-cost Alphonse Eric that says, when played, if this card was played by your effect, draw 1 card, and main discard 2 once per turn, set this character to active. This character gets plus 500 BP during this turn. So with its full effect, it goes up to 4000 BP, which is pretty good. So definitely a card that you want to be reviving back from the sideline to be able to push for damage. And of course, this is an SR that you can only get in the starter deck. Next are the cards that will be only available in the starter deck. They will not be for the color yellow, but for other colors. So if you are opening packs and you can't find these cards, keep in mind that they are found in the starter deck and you get 1 copy per starter deck. So we have our 4-cost, 4000 BP Alex Louis Armstrong that has inherently damage too. So this is pretty funny. If you remember the Rush Renji deck, you had to pay 1 AP to give Renji damage too, and now it's pretty much inherently on a card. This card doesn't have a trigger, but still, I would say that it's pretty strong for a non-raid card. So in some way, power creep. The next card that can only be found in a starter deck is the 1-cost, 1 action point Roy Mustang that has Nullify Impact. That says if you have no cards in your hand, this character gains 1000 BP. So since it starts at 2000 BP, it goes up to 3000 BP. So pretty much a decent card to be playing in your Roy Mustang deck, and it has a draw trigger. The next card is the Father card that says if you have 20 or more cards in your sideline, this character gains Impact 1. And it also says when played up to 1 card with 2 or less required energy, 1 AP cost, and Homunculus affinity from your sideline set to resting onto your field. So note this card takes 2 action points, but you get to play a card basically for free. It has an active trigger with 4000 BP. And last we have the 3-cost 1 action point King Bradley that says when played, choose up to 1 other character on your field. It gains this character cannot be chosen by your opponent's trigger abilities until the end of the turn. So definitely a great defensive card that you can play in the back row, since this card generates 2 energy, has a draw trigger, and has 3000 BP. So for the booster pack, this will release on July 25th, 2025. And of course, the cards that we'll be searching for when you're opening the booster pack will be the 3 stars. So the first 3 star that we have is the Edward Alphonse, which looks pretty good, being monochrome with gold foiling around. And we also have our Roy Mustang with the same color palette, which looks definitely pretty nice. We also have some 2-star cards. So we have our 2-star Edward Alphonse, his brother Alphonse Eric, Roy Mustang, Riza, Greed, Envy, and Lust, don't forget. So we'll be going over each individual SR that is important to their colors. We have our 4-cost 1 action point Edward Alphonse. That is a raid card that says on your turn, this character gets 500 BP. So since it starts at 3500, it will go up to 4000. And it says on play, choose one of the following effects. Draw 2 cards, place 1 card from your hand to your outside area or sideline. Or you can choose, if it's your turn, you may play up to 1 Alphonse Elric with required energy of 3 or less, and AP cost of 1 from your outside area to your area rested. If you did, place one of this character's raid source to the outside area. This character is no longer in raid state. So don't forget, if you lose a card underneath, it loses all abilities in the raid box, so it will go down to 3500 BP. The next card is his brother, Alphonse Eric, with 4 energy, 1 AP, that says when in the outside area, if Gate of Truth is in your area, reduce the required energy of this card in your outside area by 1. It also has Nullify Impact inherently, and also says on play, you may play 1 AP if you did choose one of the following effects. If this character is played by your effect, it's all instead. Choose up to 1 character on your opponent's front line and rest it. Set this character to active. If you use the previous card Edward to revive this card, you basically get to choose both abilities, so you can rest an opposing character, and this card is set to active to be able to attack on the turn it's played. We also have some synergy cards, like the 1-cost 1 action point Alphonse Eric that says main rest this card, retire this card, place 1 Edward Eric without raid from your outside area face up under 1 Edward with raid on your front line that is not in raid state. If you did, set this character to active, becomes raid. So basically this is a way to get back your raid cards into their raid state to gain all of the effects in the box. So definitely a card to look for when building your deck. We also have the 3 cost 1 action point Gate of Truth that says this field cannot be chosen by your opponent's effect. More than likely this card can never be destroyed. It also says on play, if there's an Edward or Alphonse on your area, draw 2 cards and place 2 cards from your hand to the outside area. So definitely a good effect to set up your revive synergies. Also, activate main, rest this card, place 1 card from your life area to the outside area. If you did, look at the top 6 cards of your deck, reveal up to 1 character card among them and add it to your hand. Place the remaining cards at the bottom of your deck in any order. We also have another archetype in the yellow color, that is the Sing Country. So we have our 6 cost 1 action point Greed that raids on Ling Yao, and it says this character gains 1000 BP, so it goes up to 5000 from 4000 initially. It also says on play, this character gains, your opponent must block this character's attack if possible during this turn, so a force block ability. It also says on retire, you may place 1 card from your hand to the outside area. If you did, play up to 1 Ling Yao with required energy of 4 or less, an AP cost of 1 from your outside area to your area rested. So I would imagine if, unless somebody corrects me, you can play the base card that was under it back onto the field. We also have the 4 cost 1 action point Ling Yao, basically one of the cards that you can raid on top of. And it says this character gains all of the following effects based on your generated energy. 6 or more, on play draw up to 1 card. 7 or more, when attacking choose up to 1 other Sing Country character on your area. It gains this character cannot be blocked by a character with BP 4000 or more during this turn, and it has a color trigger with 4000 BP. So as you can see, one of the main ideas of the Sing Country archetype is to build up energy so that you can have more effects. Our next card is the Roy Mustang of the blue color. He has a 5 energy cost with 1 action point. He's a pretty long effect, but basically he raids on himself, Roy Mustang. If you have 0 cards in your hand, this character gains impact 1. When play, draw 1 card. When attacking, place any number of cards from your hand to the outside area. Choose up to 1 character on your opponent's front line with BP 1000 or less and retire it. For each card placed to the outside area with this effect, increase the BP range of characters you can choose with this effect by plus 1000 BP. When this effect retires a character, you may place 1 card from your hand to the outside area. If you did, place the chosen character to the remove area instead of retiring it. So basically the summary is that you can discard 3 cards to sideline a character of 4000 BP, and if you really want to, you can discard another card to remove that card instead of placing it into the sideline. And this card has 4000 BP. So our next card is the 4 cost Riza that says raid on herself. On play, choose up to 1 character on your opponent's front line with BP 1500 or more. It gets negative 1000 BP during this turn. Look at the top 4 cards of your deck. Place up to 1 card among them on the top of your deck and the remaining at the bottom of your deck in any order. Activate main when in the front line once per turn. Choose 1 character on your opponent's front line with BP 1500 or more. It gets negative 1000 BP during this turn, and this card has 4000 BP. So basically on the turn played, you can minus 2000 BP on 1 character with 2500 BP or more, or you can minus 1000 BP off of 2 characters with BP 1500 or more. The next card that we're showing is the 4 cost Edward. Is a non-raid card, but says when played, you may add 1 card from your life area to your hand. If you did, set this character to active, so a fairly aggressive card. And note that when you add 1 card from your life area to your hand, it will not activate any trigger effects. And you can activate main, discard 2 cards. This character gains impact 1 during this turn. So a fairly aggressive card that allows you to push and gain tempo when played. So our next card is the 6 cost 1 action point Olivier Mira Armstrong that says when played, set all Briggs cards on your area to active, so it allows you to push for tempo on rested cards you played this turn. And it also says when attacking, you may place 1 card from your hand to the outside area. If you did, choose up to 1 character with original AP cost of 2 or more on your area and set it to active. And this card has 4000 BP. So we'll be showing off some cards that synergize well with this card. For example, we have our brother, Alex Louis Armstrong, that has inherently damage 2, but costs 2 action points at 5 energy, and says once per turn, when this character attacks and wins a battle, draw 2 cards. So definitely pretty good, since if your opponent doesn't want to take 2 damage and they block, you draw 2 cards, and this card has an active trigger with a very impressive 4500 BP. And we also have Buccaneer, which is 4 cost 2 action point with the Briggs trait that says if there are 3 or more Briggs cards on your area, reduce the AP cost of this card in your hand by 1. So effectively only costs 1 action point. It also says main, once per turn, this character gains 1000 BP and impact 1. And at the end of your opponent's attack phase, retire this character and draw 1 card until the start of your next turn. So basically this character will go to 5000 BP and gain impact 1, so you'll be able to definitely at least push for 1 damage and be able to block an opposing 4000 character during their turn. And we'll be going over the purple cards. So our first card is the 6 cost 1 action point King Bradley, which is a homunculus and human, and he raids on himself and says on play, this character gains 500 BP and double attack during this turn. So effectively goes up to 5000 BP from an original 4500 BP. Also says activate main when in the front line once per turn. Choose one character on your opponent's front line. It gets negative 1000 BP during this turn. Since there is no condition on what card you can choose, you can always sideline an opposing character with 1000 BP or less. So this card is definitely a house of a card since you'll be double attacking, and with 4500 BP on your opponent's turn, you can at least block an opposing 4000 card that they may have. Our next card is the 4 cost 2 action point Father, who is also a homunculus, and pretty long effect, but this card says this card can only be played if you have 20 or more cards in your outside area, and no cards with the same card number as this card on your area. So you can have other Father cards in your sideline, just not this specific card. So you may want to play around 2 copies. This character is played inactive, inherently has double attack, and says on play, choose up to 1 character on your opponent's front line and retire it. Activate main when the outside area can only be activated if you have 20 or more cards in your outside area. Place 3 cards from your hand to the outside area. If you did, add this card from your outside area to your hand. So effectively, even if you have just 1 copy of this card in your deck, you can cycle it back to be able to reuse it from the sideline. And of course, we have our 4 cost 1 action point Lust, who is a homunculus, and is a raid card that says when played, draw 2 cards, place 2 cards from your hand to the outside area. Then if you have 10 or more cards in your outside area, draw 1 additional card. So great utility card to be able to fuel your sideline, and says on retire, return up to 1 of this character's raid source card to your hand. So effectively, if you have another raid Lust, you can keep on cycling cards to be able to fuel the effects of your other cards. And we have our 4 cost 1 action point Envy. That is a raid card that says on play, this character gains impact 1 during this turn. Also when attacking, draw 1 card, place 1 card from your hand to the outside area, and on retire, choose up to 1 character on your opponent's front line and rest it. So another great utility card that allows you to push for damage while still setting up your sideline for other characters in your deck. So our next card is a card with human trait, the 5 cost 1 action point Solf J. Kimbley. That is a raid on himself, and that says when played, choose up to 1 character on your opponent's front line with BP 3000 or less and retire it. Also activate main once per turn, place 1 Philosopher's Stone in your outside area to the remove area. If you did, this character gains impact 1 during this turn. So this card also has 4000 BP. So of note, the Philosopher's Stone is the AP restand card of the deck, so it will be naturally a card that you will likely have in your sideline. So this card is definitely a great utility card since it can sideline a card and gain impact 1. And next, a bit of spoilers, but we have our 0 cost 1 action point Nina and Alexander, who is of human trait, of course. And this card is pretty much just similar to other cards that we've seen in other sets, because it says activate main, rest this card. Once per turn, this character gets +1 generated energy, and at the end of your main phase, retire this character during this turn. So really nothing special on this card itself, but it's really the raid card that is pretty interesting because it says 2 cost 1 action point Nina and Alexander, and it has a non-raid effect that says when played, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, place any number of cards among them on top of your deck in any order, and the remaining cards to the outside area. Then if this character is in raid state, draw 1 card. And in raid state, this character naturally generates +1 energy, so 2 energy total. So this is a great utility combo. Don't forget, if you use the effect of the original base card and you raid on top of it, so the card underneath will no longer have to sideline at the end of the turn. So definitely a great little combo to gain some utility in the purple color. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos.